Hello and welcome, everybody. Thank you for joining us for today's Accounting Alchemy Network Lyceum. And I'm stoked to have a special guest with us, Dave Dick. Professionally, he is an art director, a strategist, and a founding partner of Humanfolk, which is a branding agency that helps people build deep connections with the ones that they serve. And today's topic will be focused on putting people over profits in business, a topic that we talk about a lot in Accounting Alchemy Network. So I'm excited to get Dave's perspectives around this. And before we dive in to today's chat with Dave, just a little introduction to myself and also Accounting Alchemy Network if this is your first time joining us. So I'm Alina Nikishina. I'm one of the co-leaders of the Accounting Alchemy Network. And the network is a grassroots movement where we are working to turn the accounting profession into a vehicle for positive change in the world. And we are shifting away from just accounting for things that impact our profits and our money to really focusing on how we can account for the things that we want to be accountable to in our lives, and how accounting professionals can be a big part in creating the change that we want to see in the world. So, in order to support our community members with this goal, we bring in paradigm shifting perspectives from professionals and from different business owners so that we can be inspired to do things differently. And with that said, I'm excited to get into today's conversation and welcome Dave, our guest. So, welcome. Thank you for being here.
Oh, thanks. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit about what inspired you to create a human-centered business.
Oh, yeah. Um, well, I mean, I've been a designer my whole career. I've been in art and design my whole life, really. And I think as I moved through design school and the design industry, it was very, how do I put it? It was very self-serving. It was very much about who are you as a designer and what's the kind of work that you want to do. And it occurred for me as almost like being an artist. Like it felt like I was being taught and guided to do all these things for myself. But really, at the end of the day, design is about other people. It's about finding new and innovative ways to create things that support people, that help people, that ultimately give them the ability to cause some result out in the world. So I think as I continued to become disillusioned with my industry and my entire practice, I think I started to look for ways to carve it out for myself and do the type of work and have the conversations that I wanted to be doing. Um, I think it's really easy to say words like empathy and human-centered design and use all these buzzy words. And I think it's a very different thing to practice it. And I think it takes a lot of giving up of the self, and hence why I felt like I didn't really fit in agencies or internal teams, um, and it all just kind of happened. I wouldn't say that it's something I'm like, you know what, I'm going to go out and I'm going to do this.
Ah,
It was actually in 2016 where I lost my job. I had a 4-month-old baby, and my wife was really great and basically said, do nothing, like, kind of run out your severance and just figure out what you want to do. And I spent time with my kid and spent time with people and grew vegetables and, um, transformed my backyard and had friends over. And I think I just was like, oh, I've never taken the time to stop
wow.
for a minute and just be a human being. And I think as I took that time, I started to really look at what I was doing for a living and look at the discipline of design and decide to kind of just go out on my own and do it the way that I want to do it and make it actually about other people.
Mm, very cool. It's interesting you say that it happened for you. You said 2016, is that right?
Hmm. Hmm.
Okay. Yeah, and how for like I would say the world got that opportunity, I guess, during COVID too, right, in 2020 to kind of just stop and not do their routine. Um,
Yeah.
So I wonder how many other people maybe had a similar awakening to what you experienced, right? Um,
Yeah, I mean, well, and it's the same with my business partner too. I mean, we were sitting in my studio and he was working on something for a client and I was working on something. Oh no, we had switched. I was drawing something for him and he was doing something for me and I just turned to him and was like, "Why don't we just do this thing together?" And we've been doing that now since it was like 2018, I think, right before the pandemic.
hmm,
Um,
okay.
so we were remote. We were remote before it was cool. We were worked from home before all that happened. So yeah.
Gotcha. Cool. So thank you for sharing that. So I'm curious, something you said, you were like talking about it and actually practicing it are two different things. So I guess
Mm.
like how have you started doing things differently? How have you started practicing it? And then also I wanted to kind of dip into how you've started inspiring your clients to do this too. So I know they're kind of two
Yeah.
separate things, but
Yeah, I think hmm. Well, I think we've seen a lot of new conversations come up and in I think the cultural zeitgeist in general. I think as we, especially as a Western and ultimately kind of European settler society, we've started to confront some of the uncomfortable conversations of systemic white supremacy and wealth disparity and privilege and all of these things have really come to the forefront of our cultural zeitgeist. And I think um, the way we start practicing is by seeking discomfort. And I think that's where we start is that we really have to do the internal work to be able to feel discomfort and be with uncomfortable feelings and in situations where we feel discomfort or where we feel uncomfortable and not take action on that and not center ourselves in the conversation or not make somebody responsible for our discomfort and really be with that feeling so that you can be present in that conversation.
mm,
I think I've been very fortunate in my life. I've had friends from third world countries. I've had friends who are disabled. I've had friends who have gone through transition. Um, and so I've been afforded a lot of spaces to ask the ignorant questions
yeah.
without judgment. And I think where I am now, kind of in my life, and having a kid, um, there was a lot of grace provided me by these people who kind of gave me these spaces where um, I didn't have to be concerned about the questions I would ask or the reactions that they knew they were ignorant and they knew that they were coming from a place of curiosity. They weren't coming from a place of argument or combativeness.
Right.
And so I think that's opened me up just to how we can be as people in creating space for other people. So I would say, how did I start practicing it? By actively seeking out discomfort so that I could learn to be okay with being uncomfortable. And then how did I bring that kind of into that world with my clients? Um, was really, again, like learning how to afford that space for someone where they can ask the ignorant questions and they can say the maybe things that aren't so copacetic and and also just again like getting them present to ultimately what they're trying to
Mm.
affect in the world. Like I was trying to affect my own, I think, understanding when I started down that road of this kind of discovery, and now I'm trying to figure out how do we integrate that into practice, whether it's design, accounting, business, teaching. How
Yeah.
do we make space for people? How do we allow people to be wrong? How do we allow people to learn while learning ourselves?
Right.
It's a
Yeah,
long
that's
answer,
that's
but
kind yeah, no, thank you for sharing that. Um, agreed that it starts with discomfort and kind of being okay with it within yourself before, I guess, speaking about it with other people too. Although sometimes it's still uncomfortable. It's just getting
Yeah, I mean,
comfortable.
it will become comfortable,
Yeah.
and I think, and that's the practice, right? The practice is be uncomfortable
Right.
because I think we have to remember in that situation, it's my discomfort.
Right.
It's not yours. You
Right.
you have your own discomfort,
Yeah.
and I'm going to let you have your discomfort. I'm going to keep mine over here, and we're not going to make each other responsible for each other's discomfort.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, because something you said reminded me that we're always inspiring Accounting Alchemy members to
Mm,
consider like what is it that you want to create in the world? What change do you want to create? What is yours to do, right? And we're kind of inspiring them to have these conversations with their clients too, something that goes
mm,
beyond maybe like, okay, thank you for coming, clients. Let's discuss your tax return. Here's your balance sheet and your P&L. Like, but actually when, first sitting with those questions for themselves and kind of going on that internal, I guess, exploration journey, and then being like, what if I start speaking about this with other people? Because I went on a journey of discovering my values and what's important to me and what I want to create. So how can I inspire
yeah.
you? So like, can you tell us a little bit about how you've done this in business specifically? Like, how did you, how have you been practicing incorporating this?
Yeah, I mean, I think, well, I would start from that kind of first thing you brought up where it's like the client aspect of it. Like we're all running our own practices or businesses, or we're trying to build a company, and we all need clients. And and I think before we can affect any change, we want to look at how we're conducting ourselves every day and how we conduct things like a sales process or how we conduct talking about our business. And it's one of the things I say to my team all the time is that, our job is never to take somebody from not being a client to being a client or from not being a customer to being a customer. Our job is to become interested in what somebody is up to and discover with them or help them become present to this new realm of possibility that they're trying to cause for themselves, the world, their business, their family, whatever it is. No matter what somebody's doing, whether it's their business, whether it's going to the gym, whether it's taking a walk in the morning, there's something on the other side of that. And it's not, oh, what do I get when I go for this walk in the morning? It's what do you get when you go for this walk in the morning every day for the next 2 years? What's on the other side of that? If we get you 10 more customers with this ad campaign, and we do that every single month, and we compound to the point where we're getting you 100 customers per month, what suddenly becomes available to you? It's a big question we ask our clients is like, oh, if this was just suddenly handled, what becomes possible? And one of our clients went, oh, I'd be able to go on, my first family vacation in like 5 years. And we're like, great, that's what we're working towards then.
Mm.
And so then it's like, what do we need to cause that? Oh, well, we need to do an extra 30K a month in the business. I need to make sure that my employees can run the business. And anytime we're talking to them from that point on, it's how are we getting you to the family vacation? How much closer are we to the family vacation? Like let's keep the new realm of possibility alive and even be in the conversation of like, what does the family vacation make available for you?
Mm.
And what actually ended up happening with that specific client was we actually launched an ad campaign. 2 months later, they asked us to turn it off because it was working too well and they couldn't keep up with all the new business. So
Right.
we put them on a smaller campaign that kept a kind of steady flow of customers in. 8 months later, rather than taking time off, they actually shut the whole restaurant down, gave everybody a paid month off, and the client or the business owner took his entire family, like his wife, his kids, their kids, and they all went down to like Florida for a month,
Wow.
right? And that's just a little restaurant up in the Northwest Territories
Right.
that we did that for. But that win was so huge because sure, we did advertising. Sure, we did weird, funky stuff that, I still love to talk about because it was a lot of fun creatively. But the win was that we actually got to change someone's life. We got to change a whole family's life, where now they're talking about expanding, they're talking about what's next for the restaurant, and for the first time, they're talking about what retirement could look like.
Mm,
But it
cool.
only came out of being present to that new realm of possibility that we were trying to awaken for them.
Wow. And I wonder if you didn't have that conversation or you didn't ask that question, how things might have transpired. I don't know. What have you thought about that at all?
Yeah, I mean, my business partner brings it up a lot where I think I think what would have transpired, I think we would have still done a good job. We would have,
Yeah.
helped them grow the business and we would have done that. And I think it would have been a one and done. We would have done our job.
Right.
But is that enough?
That's
I
interesting.
completely changed the way, or we completely changed the way, hopefully, this person views how they even run their business or why they even have a business. And I think, especially for business owners, we get so wrapped up where it's almost like the business being successful is suddenly the possibility. And that's great, but where's you in that?
Right.
Like, let's say suddenly you have a successful business. Well, what does that make available? Well, maybe you're now a successful business owner. Is that all you want to be? Probably not.
Right. Well, yes, and before we were talking, or before we hit the record button, we were talking about the business as usual economy, which is like capitalism
Mm,
and all the things wrapped up together, right? And how one of the big problems is that we put profits and money above other things. And as one of our founders likes to say, sacrifice values on the altar of profit.
mhm. Of
Um,
course.
so,
Yeah.
I think you know, you asked this question in the discovery call or like in the discovery process of onboarding the client, or like how did that happen? Oh, either I'm frozen or you're frozen. Not sure.
Think you froze for a second.
Froze for a second.
Okay. My
I heard
internet is
you asked this
unstable.
question.
Did you hear my question?
No, no.
Okay. What was I asking? Oh, I was asking when did you ask them the question? Was it in the discovery call or was it like on the onboarding process?
Right away.
Okay. Yeah.
And it goes something like, because what we do is a lot of business consulting in the brand and advertising world. We go through a lot of the questions of, like what's your revenue, what's the goals, what's the monthly recurring revenue, average customer value, blah blah blah, all that stuff. And then we bridge into the conversation where we just go, and if all of that was handled, if all of this was handled, we hit the goals, we got the project done, we did all that. What can we now do? What becomes available?
Mm,
And then they'll give us an answer. We'll go, and if that's handled, what becomes available? And we just kind of drill it down with them because again, there's something bigger at play here, and we're not always present to it.
yep. Yep.
Even if it's not your business, even when we're talking to a marketing team internally, maybe the bigger possibility is they're trying to get a promotion. They're trying to change the way their work does this type of project. So there's always a human component. And I think that's where, capitalism, capitalism leaves that behind. They leave that human component behind constantly. We have this phrase with it started as a joke. Now it's become like this whole kind of idea in our company. We call it the capitalist war machine. And we refer to businesses as capitalist war machines when the sole purpose or the only reason that the business functions is because value can be extracted from people. And so we have this, old kind of almost political cartoon sketch that we did where it's like a machine where people go in the front and there's a chute out the back that just kind of sprays money into like a fat cat's pocket, right? And every single time I talk about this with someone, they look at this silly drawing, they're like, well, where are the people? Because they go in the front, right? But they come out as money. And so this is this piece of like, I'm reminded of an article I think I read a couple weeks ago of a woman who I think she was in her early 60s and she clocked in at Wells Fargo and didn't clock out. And it wasn't until 4 days later when someone went looking because she hadn't clocked out and she died at her desk,
Yeah.
right? 4 days. And so that begs the question, what was happening? What was happening in this space where a human being was present for 4 days and nobody checked in with them? No one said hi to them. Nobody went over to talk to them. Nobody, like this entire question of the human component. It should just never happen. It should never be possible. And I think about all the offices that I've worked in, and I just cannot imagine where someone could be ignored for 4 days.
Yeah.
And that says a lot about how that company runs.
Right.
But
Yeah.
what's their share price on the stock market? And what does their P&L look like? And how happy are their shareholders?
Right.
Bet they're super happy,
Right.
right?
Yep. That's a
Yeah.
great point. And I think I mean, it sounds like you have made um being human centric as part of like your company culture and it's translated into your onboarding process and stuff like that. And I would say for folks who don't currently have this like integrated into the webs of their being of business, I think even incorporating a question such as why is that important to you and what
Yeah.
becomes possible when we meet these goals could open up and not letting down, right? Not like when they say, "Oh, because I make money," like not just going on to the next step, but actually like being like, "So what does money allow you to have? Like what's important to you?" I'm curious about like what are your values in the world and what are you creating in this world and because just kind of challenging people a little bit to be like, "Hey, have you thought about this? Maybe you don't know the answer to this." And if you don't, I mean, could be a great thing to consider because um, I think so many people are kind of just going through the motions and they're
Hmm.
kind of like, what do you mean? Businesses earn money. I'm here to earn money. Help me earn it.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, it's why I said, I think the words are easy to say and words get very buzzy. Um, and I'll tell you, like accessibility is a huge conversation in the design community. Empathy is a word that gets thrown around a lot in the design community. Um, but I've literally seen, design firms that talk about accessibility on their website, but their office isn't accessible,
Hmm.
right? We have companies that contributed, like I'm a member of a design association, and we had companies that contributed to the accessibility handbook that we wrote, and their offices aren't accessible. So what are we saying? What are we saying when we talk about it and provide it as a service, but then don't actually practice it ourselves?
Yeah, right.
Even my one of my friends is in a wheelchair, And she's talked about, being part of a whole group of people having a conversation, um, group of designers, and they're all having a conversation. And then, people just naturally kind of start walking and going where they're going to go. And the group is kind of moving, and everybody gets on an escalator. And she was left at the bottom of the escalator
Wow.
and had to go, down the hall a bit to get an elevator to go like meet back up.
Right.
And so it's an awareness that we need to cultivate. It's that if we, and I speak from the perspective of a designer, but I think in business and accounting as well is like, our job is people at the end of the day. Um, and I think everybody's job is people. And I think we kind of forget that sometimes where even the factory worker who maybe presses, a specific machine all day and that's what they do, they still have to interact with people
Right.
and they're still making something for people and they're still employed by people. And so I feel like there's this awareness that is missing.
Mm,
And I think that's all we're ever trying to do when we have these conversations in a sales call is just kind of wake you up a bit, like remind you that you're doing this for a reason, and the reason is not money. Like, yes, businesses have to make money. That's why a business exists.
right.
But there's a reason that you want money, and there's a reason that you're doing this because if we didn't need money, then we would be finding other ways to contribute
Right.
naturally,
Right.
right? I think that's why the argument against socialism is so hilarious when people are like, but it would kill innovation and it would, nobody would want to work. And it's actually not true. It's been proven so many times that human innovation and human ingenuity actually thrives and actually accelerates when basic needs are met.
Yep. Yep.
So even in that regard, when I'm working with a client, when I'm working with a client and we're trying to transform a way of being, a modus operandi, um, I first have to be present to my contribution. I first have to be present to who I'm being. I have to dial up my awareness in that moment because I'm about to shake someone sometimes to the core
Mm,
as we start to dive into some of these deeper questions. And so I have to be able to provide basic necessities in that space. I have to make sure the space is safe. I have to create an opening so that they know that they're safe, that they can say anything in this space.
mm,
Um, because again, it's if I said to someone, if I give you $100, can I ask you any question I want? And they'll say yes, right? But if I don't have that contribution, my monetary contribution, a contribution that's easy to understand, and I'm trying to parallel this to like businesses where we
yeah.
exchange money exclusively. But it's why I like participating in these types of conversations because this is how we can contribute and how we can kind of get this awareness out there where we're entering conversations already ready to contribute
Yeah.
and all ready to be part of something.
Right. Yes. So how I know that's probably not a something you can answer in a couple minutes, but like how do you go about creating this? I mean, it's a good point. Like I'm about to ask something or say something that might shake someone to their core. I mean, how how do you prepare for that?
Mm. I think it's first understanding you can never prepare the other person for it. And I think they're over here with you as somebody who is going to go deep with somebody, um, nothing can be wrong. Nothing can be bad. Everything just is. And I think that is one of the things that we have to do as the practitioner. And I mean, I say this all the time to my designers, is that, our job as a creative person is to be wrong, because it's very dangerous for our clients to be wrong. It's dangerous for them because they don't want to be wrong. They don't want to feel wrong. They don't want to feel incorrect, because who knows what traumas, past experiences, feelings, thoughts, emotions are attached to the idea called wrong. So I'll be wrong,
Mm.
100% wrong. And I'll just take all of that. And so, how do you prepare? I think you first have to find a deep curiosity and love for human beings in all their ugliness and beauty and glory and ridiculousness and absurdity. I think that deep fascination for the human condition is how we start to prepare ourselves. And I don't know if I'm answering the question, but I'll give an example. I'll give an example where we'll ask permission a lot.
Okay. Yeah.
So we'll say, can I be really straight with you?
Oh, yeah. Consent.
Yeah, right. Like, and understanding that consent can be revoked at any moment. So asking for consent, can I be really straight with you? And when they say yes, say what there is to say. If I have something else, I might actually follow it up with, can I offer you something else?
Yeah.
And so I'm constantly reaffirming that consent and constantly allowing this person choice in that moment, which also allows them, we'll also say, like, where's your head at right now? Or we'll pause the whole conversation. I mean, we're going to pause for a second. What's over there with you? I just want to check in and see, like, where your head's at and what's kind of running through your brain right now. And
Mhm.
sometimes we'll get, sometimes people are like, oh, nothing. I'm just here for the convo. Or, I actually didn't really like when you brought this thing up, because I don't think that's what we're focusing on. And I think sometimes in that space, I would get feelings where I'm like, oh, well, I didn't want to. But again, that's where I start to center myself.
Yeah.
Right. So it's again like asking for that consent, constantly reaffirming that space, constantly solidifying the safety of it, so that person can just continue to open up. And sometimes what we'll do in workshops, um, is we'll purposely not try and antagonize the person, but we will purposely ask a reductionist question to get them a little bit emotional, to then come at us with something that they want to say. So we were working with a Montessori school, and Montessori it's the only scientifically backed pedagogical model. There's a lot of depth and nuance to the model, and so it's hard to understand it for a layman. And so I just remember asking a specifically reductionist question, um, and having the practitioner just like tell me I was wrong and launch into this whole thing about what Montessori was. And I just listened. And meanwhile, my business partner is furiously writing notes and capturing what this person is saying and
Yeah.
taking it all in. And when she was done, I was smiling, and she's like, "Why are you smiling?" I'm like, "Because that was incredible. And that was everything we wanted to hear. And I'm sorry if you were upset, but I asked the question on purpose." And then she burst out laughing. And then my business partner read back what she had said. And she's like, "Yeah, that's it. That's exactly it." And I'm like, "Yeah, we just needed to get you, riled up a little bit to give us exactly what we needed."
Does
But again,
reductionist mean like like oversimplification of something?
oh
Like
yeah, like
is
diminishing it.
Montessori like, I don't know what it is, like a simple structure or something? I don't know.
Yeah, like I think I said something. So it's like learning through play,
Oh, okay.
which Montessori people hate that phrase
Oh, okay.
because it's so much more, it's so much deeper than that. But by reducing it, suddenly we got this barrage of ideas,
Hmm.
and and it was everything we needed. But
Interesting.
it was only through being present with this person that this person was holding back.
Yeah.
They maybe felt like they couldn't tell us we were wrong. And
Hmm.
so in that moment, I could keep pushing, I could keep digging, I could keep, asking questions, which doesn't always work. And after a 2 hour Zoom workshop, people are tired. They probably have other meetings they have to go on, or they've just come off of other meetings as well. And so, hey, you know what? How about I just be wrong? And then we'll see what we get.
Hmm. Very curious. Yeah,
Very curious.
I'm I'm sitting here thinking about how this might apply to accountants specifically, right? Because
Mm,
I'm trying to put myself back at the time when I was working at a firm and onboarding new clients and stuff like that. And I remember just having conversations about like, okay, so you have a business and you have needs of meeting your taxes and your books. We can do that for you. It's X
yeah,
amount of dollars, and we're client centric, so like we're gonna talk to you about your stuff every month. We're not just gonna like, you can call us and ask questions, but that's pretty much it. Didn't really go beyond that. I feel like the clients
mhm,
that stayed with us for decades, they knew like they had a dedicated accountant and like they had conversations, of course, about health and kids and whatever else, but like
mhm.
I don't the conversation was primarily like, okay, this is how much money you've made, or this is how much you've lost. Let's prepare to pay 5 grand this quarter for tax,
Yeah,
and that's it.
yeah.
So,
Well, I mean, I think it would start. I mean, if I was working with an accounting firm
yeah.
to work on their service design or their customer retention, anything like that, we would start, I think, from the highly emotional place called money, and really start to look at, you know, how do they approach that conversation? How do they approach the space of money?
Mm,
And what are the kind of foundational ideas that we have around money?
yeah.
Because, I had a coach that used to say context is decisive. And so it's a little esoteric, but the way that I've always kind of looked at that is who we're being creates the space.
Mm,
How we think creates the space. How we speak creates the space. How we address people creates the space. But more so than that, like our foundational belief system creates the space. So I want to work with an accountant that's there to support me rather than just provide me a service, because I'm of the like creative artistic community where most of us have avoided money our whole life
yeah.
because it terrifies us or is highly emotional, or we've never really had a lot and we don't know what to do with it. Or I talk a lot about I grew up um, fairly comfortable. Like we always had money when I was growing up. So I was never really aware of how to manage money or deal with it. And so it was a highly emotional space, and still is. My wife and I are trying to do our best and do what we can, and it's still a highly emotional space.
Mm,
And so I think sometimes that's where we have to start
hmm.
is,
So what,
as an accountant, what do you believe about money?
right. So what, I mean, I kind of like where this is going. So what, I guess, what questions would you, like, let's say you were looking for an accountant, what questions would you want to be asked, or like what topics would you want approached, and when in the process would you want them to be presented or arise, whatever?
I mean, for me personally, I don't like to waste time. I like things right out of the gate. And I think in the realm of trying to acquire customers, right out of the gate is the most important thing. I think, again, I'll speak from, like a design perspective. I'm sure it's similar in the accounting world is we're so close to what we do, we spend a lot of time talking about what we do.
Yeah,
But at the end of the day, like the accounting should just be great.
right.
My books should be done, my taxes should be done, I should not be getting audited, I should have all my ducks in a row, like I should be able to open up my P&L and see it, and like that should just be great.
Right, like standard.
Yeah. It's like when people talk about like, oh, well, my graphic design is really excellent. Well, yeah, I hope so. Like I'm hiring you to design the brand of my company. It should be great. So if we get rid of the conversation of the quality of our service, what's left?
Hmm.
The only thing that's left is the human being sitting across from you and what they're dealing with and what they care about. And getting so interested in that we can effectively deliver a conversation that's right inside what they're dealing with. And so I think for me, my accountant, like the reason I love him is that like we meet once a month and the first question out of his mouth is how's the last month been for you?
Hmm.
And he starts with a very personal, very human conversation because he knows money's a very emotional space for me. So we kind of get into like, how's business been? How are things going? How are you doing? Here's what your balance sheet looks like. And then, I have a bunch of feelings, and then we have a conversation about it. Right. But I think when I first started talking to him, all he wanted to know was where we were going, what
Hmm.
was holding us back, and what we were looking for help with. And so it just felt very supportive from day one.
Hmm. Yeah, so perhaps maybe like in the uh onboarding or maybe the discovery conversation or something like that, just even asking questions like uh what is I don't know, what is your relationship with money as far as like
Yeah.
your emotional relationship? I'm curious.
Yeah.
Um, when you work with money,
When
how is that experience for you?
yeah, when you owe money,
Yeah.
how does it feel when you owe money? And I mean, it depends, where you kind of take that conversation. But again, inside of creating that kind of new realm of possibilities, like let's say you met all your fiscal goals, what are we doing? What does life look like?
Right.
Right. And having that person be present to that, because again, I think it's so easy to say, work more or save more. Um, but when we get into that conversation of like, hey, we're saving for the family vacation, or hey, we're saving for, a month off. We're doing all this work for this thing over here that you said you wanted, and then accountants kind of bringing that into the conversation, right?
Right.
Why are we managing your money at all? Why don't we just put it in a big pile, hope for the best?
Well,
Like,
well, a lot of it that's I think about this a lot and talk about this a lot with other accounting alchemy folks, but like a lot of it historically has been compliance based, right? It's like you come into me because you don't want to get in trouble with the law, basically. Like if it wasn't necessary, you might not even do it. I mean, I've had so many clients before that were like, haven't done my books for 5 years and I'm overdue on taxes. So can you help me? I'm like, okay, sounds good. So to me,
Yeah,
it's kind of like if I didn't need to, all I need is really my bank account balance, and as long as that's positive, I'm good.
yeah.
But we know that that's not true necessarily. But I think like everything that we've talked about so far, it's like I think it's the work starts with us, right?
Mhm.
So a lot of accountants, and I don't know, I'm curious, like in the design world, marketing, branding world, would you say that like a typical agency, would you say that they're like you, like they want to have these more emotional conversations, or are they kind of like,
Yeah.
let's down to business, let's make you as much money as possible type of thing? Like,
Yeah, I mean, well, I don't even think it's I think I'd appreciate it more if it was like, let's make you as much money as possible. I think it's very self-serving still.
hmm.
I was in we were entertaining a potential relationship with an agency, and we were in a sales call. We were in a sales meeting with them on their side of the table, trying to close a client together. And again, like it was traditional agency processes, but again, like there's this missing human quotient where I didn't see the proposal or the quote until minutes before the presentation.
Hmm.
And so even there, they're not even considering the emotional effect on the people that are on their team, the emotional impact of being prepared, of even the people on their team. And then what they pitched, we were pitching to like a startup that's moving fast, and they got to get moving so they can make some money. Um, and good company. I believed in what the company was doing. I think they had a solid contribution to the world. And the agency pitched them, 3 months to do a strategy, and then they would, do the campaign work after. And again, it doesn't consider the people. So, what you're asking them to do is to wait for 3 months while you as a company do all this thinking and come up with a plan. And what are they supposed to do in those 3 months?
Hmm.
They're trying to make money, they're trying to grow a company, they're trying to keep people employed. So again, there's that lack of empathy, there's that lack of consideration of what's over there with another person. Even with our company, we've been going down the road of projects, project-based kind of services. It's how we've always run. The landscape of the industry has changed a lot, and we started to look at, how do we fit and who really needs what we do. And, a lot of people right now, in the way the world is going, they're not spending a ton of money on the type of work that we do anymore.
Yeah.
So we actually flipped our whole business model around and redesigned the entire way we deliver our work, to target specific marketing agencies, um, to vertically integrate with them. And so again, it was kind of taking that step back, going, well, this is what we do, and we think it's great, and it should just be great. Well, who cares? Like, who actually cares? Who needs it? And more importantly, how do they need it?
Hmm.
And what do they need out of it? And to be frank, they need to make money on it.
Right.
And what an esoteric thing to say, like, hey, hire us to design you a logo and you'll make a whole bunch of money. That's just not how it works. But what if we could inject an entire way of operating into a company and actually support them on making money off of what we do by either selling it to their clients or putting it out there in the world? And so our whole business has changed to
Wow.
serve people.
Yeah.
And that's only been in the last like 6-ish months that we've completely changed the whole company.
Huh. Yeah, I see where like I'm listening to what you're saying and I'm like attempting to pick out elements of like what to bring to
Hmm.
our listeners here, because I'm like, okay, well, we unfortunately have this whole compliance bit. Like I can't just not do your tax. I mean, I guess I could choose not to do your taxes or your books, and I could just simply be an advisor basically. And like, there's
Mhm.
those kinds of accountants out there, and the majority are kind of doing this compliance game still, right? So it's like I think even even just asking those questions and having more of those human conversations that go beyond just like here's business today and
Yeah.
goodbye now. um I think you can influence. Accountants have a lot of influence because they're trusted advisors. And it's usually a relationship that you develop over time. It's not like you see me once and you never see me again. Like,
Yeah.
hopefully, if I do a good job, you'll stick with me for years, right? And like, what I have to say probably matters to you. You probably hold me as a
Mhm.
trusted person in your eyes, right? And so how can I inspire you to be more successful, not in just business, but also like flourish in life and contribute to your well-being? And how can our meetings contribute more to your well-being? And I think what you're sharing with me is that it starts with the internal, like doing your own work to even become comfortable, I guess, to sit down and be like, oh, humanity, like the good, bad, ugly, and
Yeah.
beautiful, right? It's like being comfortable just even having a human conversation. Maybe not
Mhm.
the client is maybe not the first person you start with, but somebody you feel more comfortable with if you're completely not comfortable having a human conversation. And I mean, like in our accounting alchemy meetings, right? When this is different, but sometimes we'll meet in like a social setting, and the
Mhm.
first thing that we do is we'll either do a grounding, kind of like a little, let's get into the present moment, and then we'll have like a real human check-in. So we'll be like, tell us a little bit more than just I'm good or fine or okay.
Mhm.
How are you showing up to this meeting today, right? Um, just things like that. Uh,
Yeah.
Starting with small things or showing up to these meetings and practicing human check-in
Mhm.
and then incorporating that into your client sessions. Um, and then maybe it can start to become more of like, okay, I'm going to start in my onboarding process or in my discovery meeting, I'm going to ask these questions about, I'm just curious, like, what is your relationship? What is your emotional relationship with money? Like, how's it been for you? And if you tell me
Yeah.
that you're scared shitless, I'm going to make a note of that. And then next time we have a conversation, I'm not going to be like, let's talk about your loss.
Yeah.
Or like, let's talk
Yeah.
about the 10 grand you owe.
Yeah. Well, and it presents because again, context is decisive, right? Having that context would allow you to shape and color how you interact in those things. Like look, I don't think it's lost on a business owner that if they owe 10 grand, they got to talk about it,
Oh, yeah, totally.
right? But again, I think we want to act more like doctors.
Hmm.
And I think that's a big part of, even in our sales process. It's more about getting curious where the pain is and doing all the diagnosis so that we can effectively prescribe a course of action rather than coming into that space as a knowing that I know what to do because I'm an accountant and this person needs to deal with their money, right? You know, and then I think, if I had any advice for accountants, start having that relationship to money conversation just with anybody out in the world.
Hmm.
Hey, I'm an accountant, and I've been having this conversation. I'm just really curious, like, how do you relate to money? And get super curious. My students used to ask. I used to teach at design school, and my students would ask me. They're like, if I wanted to do like more reading on design, what should I read? And I said, you should stop reading design books. You should read Sartre and you should read a book on economics, and you should read a book on coaching, and you should read a book on high performance athletes. And it's like, start to get interested in people. And it's the same with accountants. Like, you know how to balance a book. Like, you know how to do taxes, you know how to deal with compliance, you know how to deal with all that stuff. Being better at that isn't going to make you a better business owner,
Mm,
right? It might make you a better practitioner,
right.
but it's not going to make you a better service provider. And I think that's the word, is service. And I think we see it a lot of the times as this transaction,
Right.
but servant leadership is very much being in service and of service to the greater possibility that somebody has in store for themselves. They may not be present to that. And so, if even an accountant in just that small interaction can transform someone's relationship to money, imagine what would suddenly be possible for that person.
Oh my gosh, yeah. I mean, considering how money is one of the hot topics of like relationship issues and just a lot of stress and worry and fear in the world. And your
Yeah.
accountant might be one of your only people that you even talk about money with because you have to. So, wow. Yeah.
Yeah. And again, it's that contribution. Like, how are you a contribution today? How am I going to be a contribution in this present moment? You know, and I think it's one of those things people say to me a lot where they're like, well, I'm not creative. And it's like, yeah, you are. Like, the act of even saying that created that you're not creative. And so I think this is the great the great crime, is that, like, human beings create every second of their existence, every word they speak, every glance they give someone, every smile, every single thing creates something.
Hmm.
And so, sure, I guess in the way that you say creative, that you can't sit down and draw a portrait of your dog, sure. But I would say you can't draw. I wouldn't say that you're not creative.
Yeah.
I think accountants can bring a lot of creativity to finance. And I think inside of that, they can bring a lot of creativity to the conversation around finance and the space in which that conversation happens.
Love that. Yeah. And I'd also just remind whoever's watching, and Stacy too, that you have a lot more influence, and you have a lot more influence maybe than you recognize or realize. And um yeah, even if we don't do all of these things perfectly, I think being more intentional with the service aspect of like we have a human being in front of us, and how can we recognize at least some of the facets of that and not being so transactional um,
Yeah.
might really create a lot of impact beyond the bottom line dollar on
Yeah.
all sides.
Right. I mean, you know, I think we hear a lot of, like, people first business a
Yes,
lot, where businesses like to say that.
right.
And in the kind of capitalist war machine, they are people first, because, without people they can extract value from, they have no business.
Right. Step number
And
one, people.
step number one, people. Step number two, create a mechanism that extracts value from them.
Right.
And so, I think in the way that the world is going, and I think in the way that business is going, I think we're going to see a lot more small businesses arise.
Yeah.
I don't think the giant conglomerates, the giant offices, the massive overheads, I don't think that's long for this world anymore.
Yeah. I agree.
Um, yeah. And I think, you know, our dream for our company is that everybody makes we're very, very small, still very, very, very small. But the goal, is that we grow to, maybe like 10 people, maybe a little bigger. I don't know. I don't want to be too big. Um, because the dream is that everybody makes the same amount of money. If like, why should I make more
Right.
just because I've been around longer? Or why should I make more because I own the business? I couldn't do it all by myself, right?
Yeah.
But, I even talked to somebody today that, they would get pulled into a meeting to like pitch an idea and, they would build a whole deck and they would build the whole idea and present the idea and do all this. And the client would sign on and the salesperson would get the commission.
Oh, right. Yep.
And so then again, like I come back to that like human quotient. And so what does that do? What kind of feelings does that elicit? How do those feelings then go back into, the office space and how do they impact that environment?
Right.
Because now we have somebody that feels undervalued. And not only do they feel undervalued, but they actually have like a measurable quotient that
Right.
they can prove how much they're undervalued.
Right.
And I just look at the domino effect that happens because of that.
Right.
And for a company like mine, because we're so small, that would ruin us.
Yep.
But yet that same logic isn't applied at a larger
Right.
corporate level.
Yeah, a lot of that stuff is not very transparent and there's, you can't talk about your salaries and stuff. Oh my gosh, Dave, I I feel like we just started on a new rabbit hole path and I'm like, now I want to talk about the principles of like the next economy's businesses and stuff like that because
Yeah.
and we do gotta go though.
Yeah. I could talk to
I
you
wanna I
forever.
wanna be I wanna be cognizant of our time here. So I really appreciate you for being here today. Um, this was really cool. So I hope we inspired some folks to like start having different conversations with their clients, even if it's just like inserting one little question or something like that in their
Hmm.
onboarding experience or their discovery process. So curious if people would like to contact you or work with you or something like that, where might they find you?
You can find me on LinkedIn. You can find me at our website, humanfolk.com.
Cool.
Um, Hit me up on LinkedIn. I'm always down to have a chat. So that's a big one for me is I try and take these kind of calls on, once or twice a week. So if anyone's out there and they want to pick my brain, have a 15-minute coffee chat or something about how you can start prioritizing people in these conversations, I'm an open book and I'd love to share.
Awesome. Thank you for offering that. And thank you for
Yeah.
being here. I'm so
Yeah.
glad that
Thanks
we
for having
finally
me.
connected.
Definitely. I mean, as I said, I could talk to you forever. So we
Yeah.
should definitely have another chat soon.
Awesome. Sounds good. Well, have a good evening and thank you to whoever's turning into the replay. Thank you, Stacy, for being here. And yeah, we'll see you at a future Lyceum or another event. Bye.